Welcome back to 20-Sided Adventures. My name's Ryan. This is Summoner 401, the end of my Summoner series. Now, as I have always done and mentioned in these videos, Summoner 401 is very much assuming you are playing with free archetype. I enjoy this variant rule because it opens up a great deal of freedom and unique character creation, and I generally try to highlight unique archetypes that may not see the light of day because they are not optimal, but I really enjoy free archetype for the story building more than optimization. If you like what we're doing here on the channel and you haven't already, please give a like and subscribe down below. It is very much appreciated. And as always, easiest way to support the channel, leave a comment. We'll chat about it. With no further ado, let's get into Summoner 401. So one of the first right out the gate, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on because I've covered it in some other videos and it's a pretty common one, but I think the Archaeologist could be a lot of fun for the Summoner. And this because in your digs and your findings and you're seeking out magical knowledge, perhaps this is the story hook as to how you found your Eidolon companion. Kind of dig that kind of thematics in creating an archetype. I really think archetypes a lot of times fill the gap in the story rather than being just a mechanical take to achieve X, Y, and Z, though it can be that too. Some of the benefits, you get 2 skill expertises out of this dedication, so you're getting Society and Thievery up to Expert. You also get a +1 bonus on Recall Knowledges for Ancient History, Peoples, and Cultures. And if you're playing a more studious Summoner, that could be a really good take. Magical Scholastic gives you access to a few more cantrips, so you can have these really effective guidance, detect magic, and read aura cantrips without taking up vital spell slots for your Summoner. You could also go a couple routes where you have access to some more rogue kind of minded things with Archaeologist Luck, Delay Trap, things of that nature. And then at 10, Greater Magical Scholastics, you can cast Augury, Locate, and Veil of Privacy. So just some more spell options that are utility focused, so your spell slots can be used for the more combat effective spells. Another one I'm not going to spend a lot of time on is the Archer. If you want to go a range support build, there is a wide variety of feats to take to give you a bonus to when you're taking those single action range shots. So again, not spending a lot of time on this one. It's just a playstyle choice if you wanted to be maybe a little more optimized with some ranged attacks in conjunction with your spellcasting and your Eidolon. Now, a very thematic take that I think will also be very effective is the Draconic Acolyte. This one I went over in my Draconic Codex video, so if you want to see the full breakdown on it, go ahead and jump to that video. But again, I think this one could lean in if you took the Draconic Eidolon, so you have a pet dragon, you're also a Draconic Acolyte, so you get this Draconic gift, where you essentially summon the essence of perhaps the dragon's parents, if it's a hatchling, or the essence of what the dragon is in its more full form elsewhere, and it lets you lean into being that dragon summoner. Channel Draconic Essence is a single action that allows you to bring forth this Draconic Essence to kind of form itself as this ethereal version of perhaps what your Eidolon will one day become. And because you are summoning forth this Draconic Essence, it kind of leans into that being a summoner. This could be useful on your summoner, however, due to the Draconic Salvation, where you critically fail a saving throw against an effect with the same tradition trait as your Draconic Benefactor, and your Spectral Dragon is in your space, so you have to be occupying it. So this reaction will help you save if perhaps you're not as good as your Eidolon is, and you need to bump the success level on your save because it is the weaker of the two, and you're in your Draconic Essence. You can use this reaction and improve it by 1 degree of success. Draconic Fury for a breath weapon attack. Using perhaps the Act Together, you get the 2 action on this. Your Draconic Essence breathes its breath weapon, and then your Draconic Eidolon will take its activity. The Draconic Resilience, you can place this over top your Eidolon perhaps, or keep it on yourself, but it grants a +1 status bonus to AC, and this lasts for as long as your Eidolon or an ally is in the space with your Spectral Dragon. So instead of having to maintain the focus spell that boosts your Eidolon's AC, you could forego that feat and use this as a method to boost the AC of your Eidolon. Essence Overflow, to do an Emanation Burst off of your Draconic Essence could be really good. 66 damage, basic reflex save. It's a 2 action, just giving you more options to drop some burst damage. Reactive Resilience is a good take for the Summoner. Again, if you have damage being spread across 2 different targets and you need to blunt some of that, you can use this reaction, end your Draconic Essence, and gain resistance equal to your level to that damage that's incoming. At 10, the free action to summon your Draconic Essence as part of initiative roll is just maximizing the action economy on your summoner all around. And then Frightening Power is you essentially get Frightful Presence from your Draconic Essence. And again, just a lot of really good synergy. At 14, leaning into being a summoner, you can summon the full dragon now as an innate spell. And then at 16, I'm always just bemused that you can create an interdimensional hoard to stash all of your goodies in that absolutely will not be stolen by your Draconic benefactor that has granted you all of these abilities. Stonebound doesn't make a lot of sense if you are not taking the elemental Eidolon and specifically leaning into the realm of Earth, but if you are, I think this is a great thematic way to get some good synergies out of your archetype, and then again, just be very thematic. You're going to have a pretty good constitution. You're going to get lower plane of Earth, which could be useful because your Eidolon is probably coming from there, and you're probably getting Terran from the Eidolon already, so you get to pick a different language of your choice. And then check this out. Increase your maximum hit points by your level. So you're just getting more hit points, which might be very important for your Eidolon that is just out there getting hammered on. Elemental Existence at 4 is going to give you an option to take an Oread feat that is not a lineage feat. There's a couple okay choices in there that'll give you like Dark Vision or the ability to stealth on rock or use acrobatics through difficult terrain. It's okay. I think gaining Summon Elemental as an innate primal spell for an already restrained list of casting is a great option to go with the Stone Guardian, and I really think the primary take for the summoner. At 6, you can resist some persistent bleed damage, or I think more importantly, take Stonebound Magic, which gives you a few primal innate spells, which again, on the summoner, the more places you can find to cast without taxing your already small spell list is a great take. At 8, you can become a statue, because you never know when that could be handy. At 10, you get Rock Flesh, where you gain resistance to physical damage, except to adamantium, equal to the number of class feats that you've taken from this archetype. So getting a little bit of damage reduction is a great way to go on yourself. And then at 12, you become one with the rock. You don't need to eat or drink. You can just spend 6 hours as a rock and become well rested. You also gain bonuses to disease, poison effects, things that would paralyze or stun you. And when you get a success on these saves, it becomes a critical success instead. So if you're going that really earth elemental themed summoner, I think Stonebound is a great way to go. Okay, so for my controversial one, the Iridian choirmaster. The Iridian choirmaster is all about the union of two things becoming one, which has a great amount of synergies with your summoner and your Eidolon companion. It has the requirements that the person you choose to be your student must be one willing, non-minion ally. So your Eidolon is not a minion. It is, in most cases, living and should be willing because it is your Eidolon. So I would make the case that this is perfectly accessible to your Eidolon being your student. Now, do take note, in Pathfinder Society play, they do specifically mention that the character needs to be have an organized play ID and a character number in their record. So this tells me rules as intended, and Eidolon is perhaps not really meant to be done, but check with your GM. I don't think it's very game-breaking. I wouldn't even call it the most optimized choice you could potentially take, but I think there's some great synergies with the class, and it would be a lot of fun to play this way. So the base dedication itself allows you to cast Message, and that's really pointless for the summoner because you are telepathically connected at all times. Now, where some of the more interesting things come in is successive feats. Lesson of the Broken Wing. This one is interesting because you will take a creature within 60 feet of you and you will make yourself vulnerable to it by taking a -1 to your AC, which if it's not a ranged attacker, not that much of a risk. And now your Eidolon gains a +1 circumstance bonus to strikes against it, thus maximizing its chance to hit with minimal risk to you. Also at 4, Lesson of the Circling Gale, you could take a step and then your Eidolon could take a step. You're just continuing to maximize the action economy between you and your Eidolon. Could be a really interesting take. Ensnaring Disarm, if you are going a disarming route, could be kind of interesting between you and your Eidolon, but that would require you to be a little bit more of a melee-focused summoner, where you would take a disarm attempt, and then your Eidolon is able to snatch the thing away, and they're now carrying the item that you have, instead of having it drop on the ground. Repeat Lesson could also be of value, where if your Eidolon fails at an activity, you can make a reaction to attempt the same activity and show them how it's done. Lesson of Mutual Gambits. isn't very action economy efficient in my mind because you have to do the initial feint and succeed, and then you spend an action to grant that benefit to your Eidolon, which if your Eidolon is more ranged or spell casting, maybe that would be value. If this could work the opposite direction, it would be much better, I think, for the Eidolon to grant the feint to the casting summoner, but not so good, I think. However, Lesson of Sympathetic Vulnerability, I think, is the better take at 8. Where you temporarily borrow the essence of your student's attack to infuse it for yourself. So if you've taken the option to where your Eidolon is doing energy damage and it is against a weakness that they have, the damage you deal from a strike or spells is now the type that triggered the creature's weakness instead of its usual type. So it lets you change the effects of a spell to the correct type, or just your melee attacks now get that benefit. Lesson of Splintered Aegis, I think, is a good take with your attack. So not a strike, it's an attack. So spell attack should work from this. You demonstrate to your student a hole in the enemy's defenses before the beginning of your next turn. Your student can roll their next strike or spell attack roll against the same enemy twice and take the better result. So you do your 2 action to cast a spell. You then act together with a single action, use Lesser of Splintered Aegis, and your Eidolon takes a free strike, which they get to roll twice and take the better result. Lesson of Unified Illusion is really good, where you both make a reflex save, and you get to take the better dice roll of the 2 of you. However, you each apply your modifiers separately. So you basically get the best reflex save response possible when you're both being hit by those AoEs, which is one of the more potentially weak points of the summoner, of having to roll 2 saves and take the lesser. So 14 gets a little tricky because both of these take reactions. Now, technically, your Eidolon does have a reaction. It is just also your reaction. So Lesson of Hurricane Might, you and your student enact a graceful dance of battle. When you use the Lesson of the Circling Gale, you can strike as a free action after you step. So Lesson of Hurricane's Might would have required you to take the Circling Gale, and this is playing with some interesting multiple attack penalties, which are going to get really convoluted, so check in with your GM on this one. But you apply your multiple attack penalties, but then the student doesn't apply their multiple attack penalties, and you get a flurry of strikes in combination with the Lesson of the Circling Gale. The same thing kind of happens with Simultaneous Strike. So essentially, because your Eidolon has access to a reaction, which is your reaction, it does still qualify for this. But when you strike a creature, your student, or your Eidolon in this case, can use the reaction to make a strike against the same creature. If both hit successfully, total the damage of the 2 attacks for the purpose of resistance and weaknesses. So it's just getting your reaction into the mix for an extra melee attack. So this one's interesting. It's a weird play on it. I just think there's some cool synergies there. Check with your GM, though, because it is kind of a rules as written versus rules as intended. Let me know what you guys think of that in the comments. Runescarred dedication, I think, is a more optimal dedication right out the bat, is getting you an extra cantrip, which anything you can do to improve your casting on a summoner, I think, is a good way to go. Spell runes allow you to do this same thing. You inscribe a rune onto your body, and it allows you to cast a 1st level arcane spell. At 6th level, you now get a 2nd level arcane spell. At 8th, you can now do a 3rd level spell. So it's just giving you some more spell casting abilities in those lower tier spell slots. At 6, here's where these ones get interesting, and there's essentially you inscribe property runes onto yourself. This gives you an additional armor rune that you would normally not have access to, and the cool thing is your Eidolon gains the benefit of all of your property runes. So this is a good way to help boost your Eidolon on the front line. And then Warding Rune is going to give you a +2 saving bonus to effects from a specific school of magic. Check with your GM because that's been remastered, so you'll have to work on that. And then 10 Greater Spell Runes, you're just getting more access to arcane spell casting that you otherwise would not have. The Marshal is an interesting option to take on your summoner if you're going to be a little bit more in the thick of it up front with your Eidolon and maybe doing some melee. It's going to give you some training in diplomacy or intimidation, which is nice, and then you're going to have a 15-foot aura that gives you a +1 status bonus to saving throw against fear. Not too great, but as you get successive aura options, you're going to have ways to boost your Eidolon that have synergies with some of your spells. So for example, the Inspiring Marshal stance at 4 is going to give you a +1 status bonus to attack rolls to anyone that's in your aura. So you're going to be boosting up your allies. Your Eidolon, if you're close enough, is going to be getting that +1 to hit. And if you're going the boost Eidolon route, they're getting a +1 to damage from that spell and then a passive to hit from your aura. Now you could go the Dread Marshal stance, which gives you a +1 status bonus to damage rolls if you're not interested in using boost Eidolon with your Eidolon, you can instead just have this passive aura up that does it for you. And then also they're going to get the benefits of frightening foes when they critically strike them if they're within the aura. At 6, Cadence Call is a interesting take where it has the downside of slowing a target. You can get a quickened out of it. So each ally in your aura could be quickened that they can only use to stride. And then at the beginning of their next round, they could be slowed, which if it's at a clutch moment in the fight where you just need those extra actions right now in this moment, this could really be useful. And then later on, this particular ability can lose the slowed downside. So I think it's a worthwhile take to just have the potential to put out more actions, as well as if it is with a tandem strike benefit, and this is just the free action that's coming from it. And then you can hand out Quicken to multiple people. There could be some really good synergies there. At 8, back to back, if you're fighting up close with your Eidolon, neither of you can be flanked unless both of you are flanked, as long as you're adjacent to each other. And if you have a larger Eidolon, this becomes harder and harder for them to get both of you into that flank because you can block a lot of that space off with your Eidolon's larger form. To battle at 8 is an interesting one where you get to kind of steal some of the commander's thunder, where you can use one action to let others use a reaction to move, or you can spend 2 actions to then allow them to strike. I don't think this is necessarily the best take for just you and your Eidolon synergy, but there could be some good uses where you can spend those 2 actions. Your Eidolon gets a strike, your buddy gets a strike, your other buddy gets a strike, and it could really pan out for you. Coordinated charge at 12, you take a stride and a strike, and then if you hit, everyone who saw you gets to make a move immediately, moving towards that target. 14 is Tactical Cadence. This is where Cadence Call loses its slowed effect, and now they can also use that activity for a strike action. And so Marshal has a lot of interesting ways to maximize your action economy, help your team out, and also benefit your Eidolon. And then lastly, just a great take for most any classes, but because of the Act Together's ability to really just compound the action economy compression of Medic. If you want to be a healing summoner, the Medic dedication could be a fantastic way to go. Act Together, 2 action activity from your Eidolon, or you get a free action out of the Act Together. You use it for Doctor's Visitations. You get to make a move with that visitation, and then you get to do a battle medicine. So you've moved from 4 activities in a round to at least 5, plus some other activity compression that's out there, using your last single action as another tandem action where you and your Eidolon could both act. Lots and lots of activity compression in here. Medic is also nice because you can pretty much be done by 4 because you pick up a skill feat of either Treat Condition or Holistic Care. And if you're done with Medic and want to move on to other things, you absolutely can. The Summoner is a pretty tough class, in my opinion, to do any of these without free Archetype, just because you need so many things to keep your Eidolon very relevant. I don't know how many feats you could forego to pick up a dedication and then some of the successive feats, but with a free Archetype style play, there are a lot of great synergies with your Eidolon and just with the story building that free Archetype gets you. So these were like my 6 or 7 favorites. Let me know if I missed any that you really like in the comments down below. If you like what we're doing here on the channel, as always, appreciate a like and subscribe if you haven't. And then the easiest way to support the channel, leave a comment. Do enjoy chatting with you all. And with that, I'm going to wish you a fantastic time on your 20-side adventures. We'll catch you next time.